Welcome to Agile Network India online event. I'm Prashant, organizer, community leader with Agile Network India. Today we have online panel discussions, how to succeed using Scrum. We have Hiren Doshi, Laura Powers, and Jeff Lopez as panelists, which will be moderated by Narendra Kamra.
So let me start with the introduction, and first I will give a brief introduction of myself, and then I have a panelist. As you all know, Jeff, Laura, and Hiren are in this panel discussion, and I will be facilitator for this. So myself, Narendra Kamra, I am PMP, CSM, CSP for last decade, and have been into technology and management. So have been part of many agile transformation for last 10 years, working with the Apple, FedEx, those in US and in India, HCL. That has been part of my journey. Vido IT is the company which is founded by me, and I'm CEO and heading that company right now. And I would like to introduce to my colleagues, my panelists here. So Laura, I would invite you to give your brief introduction, and then we will start with our discussion.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting me to participate, Narendra. And I'm Laura Powers, based in Silicon Valley in California. Bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech about 1 million years ago. Moved out to California, thought it would be a fun place to work for a few years. And 30 plus years later, I'm still here because it's so much fun to work in a place with all of the startups and all of the opportunity and ideas that are represented in Silicon Valley. Came up through Hewlett-Packard and Agile as a classic engineering manager, had background in project management, and thought, you know, if I ever find an opportunity to work with really high-performing teams in a way that uses Post-it notes and gets stuff done quickly, it'll be a great thing. And little did I know, about 10 years later, a friend of mine said to me, you should check out this thing called Agile. I have worked on a number of different projects ranging from space application electronics, jet aircraft engines, to diapers, to SaaS applications, and got into doing Agile consulting 10 years ago or so now, and really happy to be here.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. Hiren, I request you to please give your brief introduction.
Yep. Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Hiren. I hope everyone is doing well, maintaining social distancing, and are safe wherever they are right now. I'm Scrum.org trainer. I've been Scrum.org trainer for the past almost 5 years. I'm also a Scrum at Scale and Safe trainer. I've authored a book, the Scrum Insights for Practitioners. I have experience of around 25 years in the IT industry, and I've been practicing Scrum over the past 15 years. I've done a lot of Agile help, transformation, adoptions with lots of companies like Dell, Bank of America, BookMyShow, and others. That's me. Looking forward to having good discussion with the panel.
Thank you, Hiren. Jeff, here you go.
Great. Thank you. I'm Jeff Lopez-Stipe. Good morning. I am a resident of Grand Rapids, Michigan in the United States, but I travel the world as an Agile consultant and an educator and a coach. And I'm blessed for the last few years to work quite a bit in India. I'm talking to you today where I'm locked down in a hotel in Calcutta, where I've been here, but I've been practicing, especially in the last couple of years, I've been practicing in India quite extensively. I've actually met a lot of you that are on this call today. So I am a licensed Scrum trainer. That is the newer certification path unveiled by Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum. And I'm also a certified enterprise coach with the Scrum Alliance. So my focus has been on working in global companies that are trying to deliver global value. And that's actually what brought me to India quite a bit, because I really believe this is the great fertile ground for agility on Earth. So as long as they keep inviting me to come back here, I'll keep coming back. So thank you all for joining us on a Saturday morning. I know there are a lot of other things you could have done this morning, but thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate that. So I think now we can start with questions, and as I have promised to all audience that we will respect their time and we will deliver the right value of their time. So let's start with that. As I could understand with your profile, that you have been into coaching, training for decades of your career so far. So I will start this from the very beginning, when top-down thing happens, when strategically leadership team has to decide to go for Agile, and even in Agile you have to decide, you have to go for Scrum. We all know that Scrum is the most adaptive framework in Agile as of today, especially in IT. Then how do you convince, how do you do the right comparison between other frameworks, among other frameworks, and Scrum? So I would request three of you to put some light on that subject, where strategy is very important, where we have to take call Scrum or others. So I would like to start with Hiren on that.
Sure, thanks, Arvinder. So these are my thoughts, right? I'll just tell you through my experience. So of late, what has happened is Scrum is mainstream. There's no question about selling Scrum to anyone. So if you look at the data that we have, the last I checked with scrum.org is we have 12 million people using Scrum on daily basis. Yeah, that's let's say very, very big number. We also have this data from version 1, which says 70 to 75% of the population that uses that practices Agile, they start with Scrum. So I think that selling of Scrum is no longer needed. I think Scrum is mainstream. I think the thing is it's going the other way around, where if someone is asking you to be a coach or consultant for that company, you need to go into the company and basically check if they do have the Agile mindset, or the mindset where they can do this quick adaptation. So for example, are they willing to give control over keeping the control? Are they willing to have that clear responsibilities and boundaries, and allow and have that respect of having it, creating a culture of safety? So these are certain things that the organizations have to think before they start adopting Agile. For that matter, for example, if you have a project that has fixed scope, fixed time, fixed cost, you're having a project related mindset anyway. So once that is there, and if you already have defined the scope, the timelines, Scrum might hurt you more than help you. So it's very important to decide where you are on the journey, and from there you pick it up further.
Hiren, you think, that journey has already been crossed when you have to sell why Scrum. So people understand, people give value, and they don't probably need now comparative analysis between Scrum and others. So you think that part is already done. So yeah, great point.
I think what's happening is you're just picking one framework is not sufficient. You'll have to have a mix of frameworks. Like if you're practicing Scrum, you're already having engineering practices. You're thinking of lean concept. Lots of things is basically getting mashed up, and that's giving you the true agility that you're looking for.
That makes sense. So great. So Jeff, what is your opinion on that?
Sure. So often when I'm talking with a company that's thinking of starting to practice Agile or Scrum, I start off not talking about Agile. And I'm really talking about the company. What's causing you to investigate this decision? What's the real critical business problem that you're encountering with? All right. Do you have a problem with cost? Do you want to increase market share? Do we need to increase revenue? Are we having issues with retaining the right employees? So you're really looking for a crucible business situation where people really have to make a change. Because as we all know, if we practice Scrum is a real fundamental way, in a way, not the way that individuals work, but whole organizations work. And if you're not willing to iterate your organization and adapt to a new organization, even Scrum isn't probably going to work. So we start out with that critical business issue. Then Scrum in particular is a framework that meets you where you're at. It doesn't inflict a whole bunch of new processes on an organization. You can start with one team or a small group of teams and create dramatic results right from the beginning. Prove that it works in the organization and then spread out. Scrum in particular is a framework that will help you do that. It lets you bring what are the organizational and business issues that are getting in our way right out to the beginning, right in the beginning, and lets us confront those and get through those before we start spreading out to the organization. So you're looking first for a critical business problem that an organization is trying to solve or confront, and then use Scrum to incrementally encounter that problem and adapt the organization in such a way that they can have 1, 2, 3, 400% improvement in whatever they're trying to work on.
Makes sense. Thanks, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, over to you.
So I'd like to build a little bit on what Jeff was just talking about finding that critical business problem and then helping leadership look at how can a framework like Scrum help improve that situation. When I work with companies right now, I think one of the most important actions at the strategic level is a conversation to help the leadership understand that adopting Scrum or adopting Agile is not a closed-ended process. It's not a project. It is something that is ongoing and continually improving, and it requires a different mindset. And for many leaders, they believe that you can delegate the transformation. And while everyone at every level of the company needs to be involved, the leaders themselves, the C-suite, the vice presidents, the upper echelon, if you will, of the leadership need to see how their work will change as well in order to enable those high-performing teams. So that's one issue. Second issue is there's a whole lot of companies that believe that if they buy Jira, they are Agile. Mm-hmm. And so they're putting the processes and tools ahead of the individuals and interactions. And so that's another mindset that we need to work through. And then finally, if there's anything that is a challenge at the beginning is companies now who want you to help them scale Agile before they've really gotten the fundamentals at the team level to a point that it is self-sufficient. And I'm not talking about excellent, I'm just talking about it doesn't suck. To me, these are the conversations. And as Jeff and Hiran said, Scrum is an obvious place to start, and then you go from there.
Sure. You picked the right point. I mean, following Jira is not enough, and people are in impression that, okay, we are now Agile. So the similar way, like I checked with few companies, you're following Agile, they say, yeah, we do stand-up meeting every day and we are Agile. So that's not enough. So it gives you freedom that you don't have to follow typical waterfall style model, but at the same time, you have to be diligent that you follow proper framework. That framework in itself has some rules which have to be followed completely. Yeah, mm-hmm. Makes sense. So
and there's some
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's some don't do's as much as there are things to do. So for management leadership, often it's helping them shift the mindset from command and control to what do I do to enable those teams to do the work and figure out the work themselves. And so it's kind of paper training the managers in many ways is a challenge.
Right. A lot of leadership doesn't realize that when they try to take this on for the organization, the biggest transformation and the biggest change is going to have to come from themselves. Right? They think, well,
between their ears.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in their heart too. Yeah. They're really, it's really fundamental change in, how a leader has to relate to the people that they have working for them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It reminds me.
Go from the top to having to consider themselves at the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I started my series of questions from top to down, because that has to happen. That has to be first sold to the leadership team who are sponsors, who are going to take the decisions which will make impact on companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Makes
again,
sense.
when
Thank
we're talking about such complex problems, right? If I can just draw an analogy, right now, what's happening? I'll just pick India right now as an analogy. We are having this. The world is fighting this virus. Yeah. So what we have done is we are doing a 3-week sprint right now with a very, very clear goal. Okay. Okay. So we are doing this 3-week sprint with a very clear goal that we want to flatten the curve and we want to get our medical fraternity ready so that when the cases come up, we are ready with it. Yeah. So that is the goal. We are constantly inspecting and adapting throughout the sprint. Yeah. We are going to have review, in fact, today with our chief ministers in India to figure out what is it that we have learned and what is that practice we need to put in the next sprint. So it is as simple as that. When the problem is chaos, where the things are changing so fast, so quickly, the risk is just that 3 weeks that we are taking. That's the risk we have taken so far. We are going to have this absolutely awesome learning, and that learning is going to get fed into the next sprint, and we continue. So that's all Scrum is all about, right? So simple, very simple framework. Start somewhere, learn, and move on.
And did you say that the sprint is 3 weeks long?
Yeah, because we are having a 21-day lockdown. So that's how I
Okay,
made 3 weeks.
gotcha. And it's interesting because companies often will say, "Oh, 3 weeks is way too short," but it feels like an eternity in this COVID virus world that we're living in now, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm now coming to the next level. All right, my company decides that, okay, I have to go agile, and you guys are able to sell that. I take that. Okay, Mr. Jeff has gone to XYZ company and he somehow convinced that, okay, yes, we are good to go for Scrum. How much money do you need? So how do you guys convince that if you are going to do that transition, which will start with a small team and it will then grow to probably the entire organization? So I mean, you have to do the right budgeting for that. And generally I have seen, that's my experience, that whenever you start selling your budget for the process improvement, there are hurdles, because sometimes your returns are not tangible. And how do you guys handle such situation? If you can share any incident, any story that you have in your past, please share that. Let's start with Jeff. Jeff sounds very exciting about it.
Well, it's interesting when you ask what should we do for budgeting this? Often my first response is don't, right? Don't try to figure out a big budget for this. You mentioned start small, start for a few teams, figure out what your biggest problems are going to be first. And also you mentioned that we might not have measurable results. Never start unless you have measurable results, right? Real measurable financial business results or market results that that you need to be able to put that. Then try to encounter your first big impediments, get those out of the way, and that will show you the pathway to figuring out how much money you're going to need in the future. Don't start with a big transformation budget, right? Because that's often a lot of that is going to be wasted just trying to organize how to spend the budget, right? Start small, create success, and learn the kind of financial resources that this kind of transformation will happen in the organization. Answer those questions first before you get into budget. So it could really start as you might start with, just a handful of teams and somebody like one of us to work with them for 2-3 months or something like that and demonstrate that this can actually work and be successful in the company. Then move on to the bigger decisions of how much money you want to spend. And it's always tie the money you're spending to a specific measurable business result. Revenue, cost cutting, market size increase, employee retention, something like that. Something very measurable that you're going to go after.
That makes sense. So, but I mean, I'm going to even convince about budget to the guys who have never ever seen the Scrum or Agile or the short-term plans. So maybe I have to also educate them that, guys, don't go for like annual big bang budgets. Go with the iterative model of your budgeting, that let's budget for probably 2 months, 3 months, and then move on as you see the results of that.
Right.
Makes sense.
If you want to Google no budget or no budgeting, there's actually a large school of thought that says companies just shouldn't budget in general. It's a line of thought that came out of the Agile community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think that the no budgeting concept is an interesting one, because the way that budgeting is done in the US for large corporations, it's usually a delta off of what did my department spend last year. So if I had a department that had a budget of 2 million last year and a certain head count, then this year I'm looking for some more people and a certain increase in my budget. And so I'm constantly working off of those deltas. Very rarely is it truly tied back to, did my organization deliver the value that corresponds to the money that I was entrusted with to use for the good of the company and the customer. Give you a great example. A couple of years ago, I was in the UK to work on a transformation for a SaaS company that had offices in the UK and in the US. And I sat down with the head of global product on the first day. We had breakfast before everybody showed up. And she said, I've been here for 6 months, and here's the situation. I control a $110 million budget. And in 6 months, I can only account for 10 million of that actually being spent towards anything that is useful to the customer, that delivers value to the customer. The other 100 million, I have no idea what's happening, except I have these departments who all claim that not only do they need what they've got, but they need more. And my first thought as a consultant was, I should negotiate for, if I can save you 50 million, can I have 10%? And she said, no. But that's the starting place that we're in with so many of these places. We need to start small and simultaneously be looking at how do you measure, as Jeff was talking, and then also start looking at how does value flow through the enterprise, and where are the places that classic waste can be removed to, and you'll have plenty of budget for anything you want to do if you can figure that problem out.
Yeah, makes sense.
Jeff Sutherland said, I've heard Jeff Sutherland say, if you're a public company taking on Scrum, if you're not planning on doubling your stock price, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Right? That's the difference. You're not I'm thinking about budget. I'm thinking about value then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hiren, what's your inputs there?
So yeah, I just pull on what Jeff and Laura mentioned, right? I think budgeting is a rat hole. It is a rat hole. If you have done something in the past, you know what you have done with it. You will have historical data. Use that historical data, plug in, and most likely you'll be successful. But when we are talking about something that is very, very complex, I think that's where Scrum is suited for, right? Where you want empirical evidence and stuff. So Scrum is suited for this complex type of projects where you just don't know. For example, right now what we are going through, COVID-19, the entire world is fighting. We just don't know. We are just learning as we go along. Some countries are putting $2 trillion. Some countries are putting $551 billion to just pump in their economy. We just don't know whether that's going to be enough. But we are going to learn and we are going to adapt to it. I'll give an example, right? So for example, this is something that keeps coming a lot when you go into this transformation. So I had this bank. So these guys are used to buying software rather than building in-house. So when it comes to buying, they were used to this fixed bid projects, just this is the scope, this is the time, and just tell us what is going to cost. And somehow it was not working. So now they're using a different approach, because it depends on the level of trust you have with the vendors and the other companies. So what they do is they'll say, these are these 10 features that we have. You tell us how much it's going to cost for you to build this. They'll just go with. So even if they have 100 features, they'll say, okay, just let's talk about this first 10 features. And they'll take these 10 features and they'll go to multiple companies and they'll say, companies go and build it for us. So they know that they're having redundant costs that they're experiencing right now, but they're fine with it, because right now they are selecting the vendor with whom they want to work. Once they're selected, they have established some type of velocity. Okay, this is the speed at which they can deliver. From then, what they do is they go into time and material. So as long as the marriage is happy, let's continue the work. And if it goes sour, let's break it and let's move on. So these are some different approaches companies are trying when it comes to budgeting and stuff. So It all depends. But when it's complex, budgeting is a rat hole. If you know historical data, plug it. If not, be very, very careful about it.
True. That's one of the sensitive area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, that answers and it's really helpful for the people who have been struggling to introduce Scrum Agile in their organization. That may be a startup, that may be a mid-sized organization.
Yeah.
So I'm now switching to next question. Risk management. Actually, with my 20 years experience, probably 8 years I spent in an organization. This is my experience in an organization where risk management itself was a very, very tedious and very elaborative exercise, and it was proven that whatever investment has been done on risk management is worth investing. A lot of people have questions about Scrum, about Agile. So are we overlooking any part of the risk management, be that mitigation, contingency, quantification, qualification, or even the risk transfer? So maybe some example of your experience, you can tell that this was a risk which could be mitigated with Scrum, or which you identified uh, that you followed some risk management process and you did not actually ignore anything. Some experience on that. Maybe I can elaborate more if that doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
No.
So Laura, you want to go first this time?
Sure. So I remember back in the day managing projects at Hewlett Packard in classic waterfall, where we would put together risk management plans, contingency plans, the whole 9 yards. And it was to check a box that we hoped we'd never have to go back to the document and do anything with. And we always seemed to be surprised when something did happen, and then we actually had to deal with the risk. And because it was a waterfall project, it happened late in the project when it really cost us a lot of time, a lot of rework, and it exposed the company to liability in some cases. What I love about Scrum is if you approach the backlog from the perspective of we're going to front load work that helps us to address and mitigate risk earlier rather than later, you actually can make a lot of progress early on in the project when you have more flexibility to be able to deal with, the alligator that's going to bite you in the rear end. An example that I would have is there was a company in Colorado that we were working with, and they were just implementing an Agile transformation. They had 8 teams. This was the smallest possible pilot that they could do, was 8 teams. So anyways, we've got these 8 teams just getting going. We get them into a room where they're talking with each other to kind of see how this is all going to fit together. And 2 of the teams realized that on this very critical project that their main customer was waiting on for delivery in 3 months, that there was a dependency of one group delivering some hardware that the other group needed in order to do some development. And because they figured it out at the beginning rather than later on, they were able to work it through and actually meet the customer's delivery. So that was a risk, a dependency risk that otherwise it could have killed the company, because this customer was ready to pull their business and they were a large enough company or customer that would have been the end of it. So I think Scrum actually helps with risk.
Absolutely right, Laura. Just pulling on to what you just mentioned. Scrum is a framework for risk management. Scrum is a framework for innovation. Scrum is a big framework for creativity. Scrum is a framework for opportunistic discovery. But let's get to risk management, right? Look at Scrum. The beauty is, as per Scrum guide, the sprint should be no more than 1 month. So what is the maximum risk you're taking? No more than 1 month to begin with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every day of the sprint, you have opportunity to do the risk management through daily Scrum. Every day of the sprint. Sprint retrospective is an opportunity to figure out, how can you do better than yesterday? How can you be better than yesterday? Sprint review is an opportunity to get your business along with you to say, okay, is your investment going in the right place? So risk management happens every day of the sprint. It is so beautifully done. So that's how I see Scrum and risk management.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to really, and this is really, really important for the people on this call to learn. Just what Hiren said at the beginning, you really need to learn how to talk about this inside your companies and with your clients. Scrum is inherently a framework that reduces risk. We don't manage risk with Scrum projects. We confront the risks and destroy the risks early. This is very difficult for a lot of traditional project managers and professional risk managers to understand because they're used to planning the risk all front. I once worked with a project manager that kind of got this, how Scrum worked, but he still thought it was unethical for him not to maintain a massive risk register, right? Scrum confronts the risks right out of the gate and starts removing them. If you have issues of high risk on your project, just like Laura said, put those at the top of the backlog. Deal with those first. And always make these risks visible that you're dealing with them in the backlog. Getting iterative feedback from customers is a way to reduce risk. Customers are your best feedback for where things might be going wrong or things might be going right. So showing real results to customers at the end of every sprint, showing real results to the risk managers is really important every sprint. One part, there's something, a story I'll share out of the Scrum at Scale training. Saab Manufacturing, the Swedish manufacturing company, their aerospace division built a fighter jet using Scrum. We teach about this in the Scrum at Scale course. They in the most riskiest from a regulatory perspective, the riskiest part of the airplane is the cockpit. That is where the regulators look the closest. So what did Saab do? They invited the regulator from the government into every sprint review, right? That's how they reduce the risk, because the regulator could look and say, that's good, I'm not going to pass that, and they got that feedback immediately and were able to iterate on it quickly. So like I said, the Scrum takes the risk by the throat and shakes it right from the beginning. Scrum eats risks for lunch, right?
Absolutely.
So this is what's really get you should, if you're on this call, practice talking about this, because this I found is a particularly difficult concept for a lot of people in traditional project management and traditional risk management to understand, that we're going to deal with the risk right up front. We're not going to try to manage them.
Right, absolutely.
And to build on what you're saying, Jeff, is I think there's two critical things that need to happen. One is I think as a community, we could improve our training of product owners to see how they can ask questions in the course of them maintaining their backlog, to ask about where are the risky items and what can we do, what experiment can we run to help address that risk up front. The other thing that I love about Scrum is it creates a forum for the technical people to be able to express their concerns about something that they see as a risk. You've seen a lot of, I'm trying to think, there was something with Boeing where the engineers knew there was an issue, but there was no good way for them to express that issue in a way that they could have addressed the risk. Scrum is the perfect, with our retrospectives and our conversations about refinement, the engineers get to say what's got on their mind.
Absolutely. Great. I mean, great point you guys brought up. And I also remember one Scrum champion in my organization, that transition which I talked, I mean, that time. So there was the same question by higher management that, okay, how we are handling risk. So he told, like, you guys are having weekly project status meeting now, which is giving you weekly risk identification opportunity. So with Scrum, I am giving that to identify every day, maybe twice a day. you are getting that opportunity to identify the risk and mitigate, or even if like you have to make the contingency plan, bang on it. So there is no chance that your size of risk register is going to increase beyond certain limit, and bang on. I mean, you can handle that right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
So now I'm switching to next level. I come to the level of execution. I come to the level where work culture has to cope up with Scrum, or Scrum has to cope up with the work culture of that organization. I'm in a generation where millennials are coming up in industry, and I won't be surprised that a lot of people are doing programming at the age of 50 or 60, and our CEO is of the 30 years. So that kind of situation is going to happen soon. It is happening. You think it will make any difference to Scrum, or Scrum will make any difference to such transition of work culture in execution?
It has to, or Scrum won't be successful. Right. It's one of the most, there are three ways that companies usually fail using Scrum. They can't prioritize and focus on the most important things. They can't deliver because they get in their own way. And they can't iterate the organization. This is actually something that Scrum does. If you are practicing Scrum well across the organization, you are going to iteratively adapt the organization so it's always the best organization you have. And that has to include everybody of all ages, all roles, all disciplines in the company to make it work well. It's an interesting way you phrased it. You know, it's I feel it's Laura might get a kick out of this. I don't think people over 50 and 60 are allowed to be computer programmers in the United States anymore. It gets hard.
Oh, but
there's that kind of age discrimination in the United States. Yeah.
But didn't you hear that the state of New Jersey is begging for COBOL programmers?
Yeah. There's still a lot of it out there, for sure. Yeah.
Because the unemployment software that they run in that state is built on COBOL, along with what about half of all the banking software. The question that you had sent to us originally talked about a 30-year-old CEO and a programmer who might be 60 plus. I hope to see, and I do believe that we're going to see 5 generations in the workplace. And it will be a good thing if we can figure out how to have this work. There's a guy in the US, Chip Conley. He was the founder and CEO of a hotel chain called Joie de Vivre. And he came out of college, founded this and grew this to be a very successful chain of boutique hotels across the United States. And in his early 50s, he decided that he would sell the hotel chain and he was going to go off to Baja, Mexico and surf until he decided to really, quote, truly retire. And then these couple of founders came up to him and said, you know, we've got this startup and we really need your expertise because we're going to disrupt the hotel industry and we need somebody who understands hospitality. So Chip Conley, once he sold his chain of hotels, ended up working for a 26-year-old at Airbnb. And so he said, I would come into these staff meetings and think, what am I doing here? These folks are agile, they're doing their work, they've got this technology, you know, what? And then he realized that they needed expertise that he had, and he needed them to show him how his phone was supposed to work. And so he's got a concept called reverse mentoring, which means that it's not always the oldster mentoring the millennial, but there's times where you create situations for millennials to mentor the oldster, if you will. And in places that I've seen that implemented, it has changed the culture because it creates a two-way dialogue, which is very compatible with how the intent of Scrum and how teams work. So I'm very optimistic about this, partially
Yeah.
because I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Yeah. And just to pull on what Laura just mentioned, right? 5 generations are going to work, and they better work. The only thing is they all refer to the same universal Scrum guide, and they have the same understanding. The beauty of Scrum guide is it is so simple, but 4 of us reading it differently, or 106 people that we have on the chat, if we all read it, we all will have different interpretation, because it is so simple, but it's also so non-prescriptive. So I can read it and I can infer something, and I'm guilty myself, right? So before attending a formal training with Ken Schwaber himself in 2006, uh, I was told that we are going to practice Scrum and you're going to be the Scrum master. You read some Scrum guide and read a black book written by Ken, and I did it. And I thought that I'm one of the best project managers in the country, or in the world for that matter, in the US. So I know everything. So I started practicing it, and I practiced for good 4 months before I realized I was so wrong. Yeah. And that happened because Ken used to run the sections called Scrum, but he'll say, we do Scrum, but we have this problem. We do Scrum, but we have this problem. It was in Burlington and I was in Massachusetts, in Hopkinton in Massachusetts. So I started attending those free sessions, and every time I attended the session, my confidence, instead of going up, it started going down. That, what, maybe I don't understand Scrum, maybe I'm doing something very, very wrong. And then he offered a class called Certified Scrum Master from Scrum Alliance at that point, 2006, and he said $2,500. I said, Ken, I don't have that type of money. He liked me, so he says, you know what, will you pay for the food and I'll certify you? I said, yeah, of course, absolutely. I attended that workshop with him, and I realized I was doing everything but Scrum at that point in time. Yeah. So having that very, very good understanding of Scrum is so important. And I believe that is the reason I wrote this book, which is about Scrum Insights for Practitioners, a Scrum Guide Companion. That, okay, what can I do to give something back to the community? So that's how it is.
Yeah, great.
Nice.
So any incident like you may have to design your coaching or training based on the age groups, or based on maybe their level of egos, I guess?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the nature of the organization. So I was, let's say, I was doing a lot of coaching one year for a big multinational company, right? And I had coached in India, teams in India for about a year, and the average age of those teams was probably somewhere in their 30s, and it went fantastic. Right, we just really transformed the results that that organization was delivering. Then I went and I did about a week of training at another division of the same big multinational company in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, right? Where the average age was kind of getting up in the 40s, maybe even close to 50. And the people had been there for 20, or a lot of people that had worked there for 20 years or more. And what was a surprise to me is something that was so natural, making your work visible, right? Making the work visible on a task board. We're going to all put the work on the task board and put our things on a physical task board and make it visible. The staff that had been there for 20 or 30 years experienced that as a form of micromanagement. Nobody had ever looked at what they had done before, right? And so we had to adapt and actually get practice at doing that together before we were actually ready to do it out in their workspaces and have everybody looking at it. We had to go through a few iterations together, just inside the training, to get the experience together of what it's like, what it actually looks like when you have your work visible. Because when they first heard about it, they felt there's no way I am putting my tasks on the wall for people to see. So we just had to practice on that and get comfortable, build some muscle around making things visible before we could start in the rest of the organization.
And I think that's also where the art of Scrum Mastership and everything comes in, right? So we say that we are a team of 7 to 9 people or 3 to 9 people, but we say the titles are outside the door and everyone is equal within the sprint. There is no hierarchy between the Scrum Master, the product owner, the development team. And we might have a very senior person in the team, having like 30 years of experience, who has moved in the organization and who has earned the title. And all of a sudden, when we take the title off, the person might not be very happy. But that's where the art comes in, right? So for example, if that person has been with the organization and through his experience of 15, 18 years, he has reached that level, we want him to mentor the junior person so that that person can come up to speed very quickly. It will be a crime if the junior person has to take 18 years to come to that level, isn't it? So how do you shadow? How do you mentor people? So all this art has to come into play, and that's when the magic happens.
Mhm.
Makes sense. It's great. We are receiving a lot of questions, so we'll keep 15 to 20 minutes for that after a couple of more questions from me. Let's take the current situation in mind. COVID, we all are seeing like 1.5 million people have been impacted. Very sad situation. And a culture which has been there in IT, but now it is going beyond IT, and even in IT, it is expanding a lot, which is work from home, right? So people are working from home, and some and doing their best work in their capacity. We are talking now about like borderless nation, working from home, where collaboration should be high. But at the same time, Agile or Scrum, they recommend co-location of the team for the best outcome. So what are your suggestions, opinion that even if we are working from home, we can probably perform better, productivity could be better, or any aspect related to work from home in today's culture? What is your opinion on that? Let's start with Jeff. Yeah.
Okay. You know, it was interesting when I first started practicing Agile 13 years ago. We would no team. You can never do this remotely, right? And teams have to be co-located. They can't be spread around. Even individual, you know, multiple teams can't be spread around multiple locations to be successful. But collaboration technology, like this tool we're using today, you know, here we are at 3 different spots on Earth, and Laura is, I think, about 12 hours in time zone away from us. We're having this real-time conversation just like that. It wasn't so easy 13 years ago. But, you know, this is something I've had to personally confront, you know, because this world, you know, the suggestion that we're all going to work remotely, that's not a world I relish. I travel all around the world because I want to be around people and work with them inside the civilization they're at. So, you know, so we've gotten way better at this technology. And then the thing we always train is, if you are working remotely, do everything you can to replicate the face-to-face experience, the face-to-face real-time experience. You know, COVID-19, look, if we look at this like Scrum practitioners, it's just a really big, interesting impediment to have. Right. Like it's just another impediment. It's a really difficult, interesting one, and we have very little control over it, but it's just another impediment to have. So explore all these technologies, but still keep the human face-to-face experience. I took a course a couple of weeks ago from Dan Messick in online training. And he actually has an approach to online training that is very low tech, high touch, very human. He uses very few technical tools in his training, and it's really a wonderful approach. So that's key. That value that says individuals' interactions over processes and tools still stays true, no matter how spread out we are and all the tools we have to use. You know, I expect that one of the things that the pandemic is going to cause is, I hope, it's really going to push the technology envelope in terms of collaboration technology. We're countering impediments now that a lot of the tool vendors are having to confront that they never thought of before. So I hope it really pushes that technology envelope. I'm just waiting for the Star Trek transporter so I can be anywhere I want on Earth.
Like that.
That will be just like
Yes.
that. Right.
Yeah.
You know, because it's the world where we're all working remotely with each other. That's going to put me into retirement sooner. I don't relish that world.
True. That's a great point, Jeff. Yeah. So world has to change. I mean, this has given such situation to everyone. He suffered directly or indirectly. So a lot of things are going to be changing now.
I think people are adaptive, right? People are adapting. Look at this session that we are doing, right? We have 106 people from all across the world. And I think this session is beautiful. I think I'm liking it. It's still effective. It's very productive. I think it is the same experience that I might get in room. Plus, I can even have a lot more discussion now because there are people from around the globe which would not attend if it's a local workshop. So people are adapting. We are adaptive nature. We adapt very, very quickly. I know of so many companies that were like, you know what? No, we cannot allow you to work from home because of our company policy, our company security. But as soon as this thing was pulled in, they said, you know what? I'm okay. You can take your desktop and you can move it to your house, but please work from home. Yeah, let's make it happen. So I think people just fall in line, and I think we will adapt. World might be different place in 2021, maybe after December. But I still think, globalization and everything will survive and we'll all be good. We'll just come out much stronger, much better at the end of this pandemic.
Yeah.
So
But still be related to the people that aren't working this way. I look out the window here in Calcutta, and I still see men riding bicycle rickshaws, transporting stuff in between buildings. They're a real net in here in Calcutta. That's a big part of the distribution network. So I watch them and I think about them working and knowing that they're helping me survive. What I have to,
True. Great. So the last question by me, and very quick and more like an experience, might be a little funny. In one of the I won't name that organization. So I was there as an agile coach to do some transition in America. But the people over there at leadership team, they were typically like of that mindset where things have to be in literally waterfall way. So every time when we are giving them demo every day, because we had to follow the manifesto that product over documentation, product over processes. So whenever we are giving demo to leadership team, and they are always asking, don't show me the demo and show me how much percentage work you could be complete. So demo versus percentage. And believe me, I didn't have any tool to tell what percentage it is. Still, I mean, with our expert judgment, we could tell like, okay, 40%. How do you deal with such? What are your experiences in that? The second story, the second funnier part is that if I am saying 40%, he's negotiating, he's bargaining. No, it is not 40, it is 35%. Neither I can prove it is 40%, nor he can prove it is 35% when we are giving the demo of the product. So
and you're wasting time arguing over 5% that means nothing.
Who's going to buy a 40% done product?
Yeah, I mean,
nobody's going to buy a 40% done product. The only thing that matters is done. And can we ship it and get value out of it now? If we can't, what's getting in the way of that?
Absolutely.
And that, again, it's very difficult for a lot of people coming from traditional project management and traditional executive management to understand, because they were used to leaning on these metrics that were always a lie in the first place. We're giving them a dose of reality that they never had before.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I think we've all heard
Yeah, go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think we've all heard the story about the study that says that the typical software application on your laptop, you use about 20% of the functionality of it. I heard one in the last couple of months that many apps are opened a grand total of one time. You don't download something to your phone and you use it once and you never use it again. If you can get to the 20% of a product that is valuable to a customer and get that to the market, you will own that market rather than being the customer who wants to get 100% of that long list of requirements to the market. I think about Microsoft. Did they truly ever need to create Clippy? Do you remember the little paper clip that would give you recommendations on how to do things on your Microsoft Word? I mean, talk about a useless a feature that somebody had to code and test and bring to market.
True.
So there we do have tools in the Scrum framework, the release burn up that can tell you actually with much more accuracy than a traditional percentage how close you are and what's getting in the way and are we behind or ahead or things like that. Even these days with teams that can do continuous delivery, even a simple sprint burn down can tell you things like that. And so they can give you that kind of heartbeat. But then it's are you paying more attention to the metric or are you paying more attention to getting the value now? Especially you look at a company like Amazon that can release software faster than once per second, right? The idea of a release burn down just becomes a lot less relevant in talking about what's getting in the way of us shipping and testing this stuff in the market today.
Keep your releases short, right? For example, every sprint itself can be a release. So most of the clients that I work with, what we do is we will say, let's plan for no more than 3 sprints, and each sprint is of 2 weeks, so 1.5 months out, and see where we are. And again, you might not be able to take it to the real customer yet, but you still have internal milestone which you can just review, give feedback on, and keep going forward. But every sprint, you still want to have a done increment, just like what Jeff mentioned. That's the key.
Yeah, makes sense.
The thing that I love about Scrum is the backlog enables, a well-kept backlog enables conversations where executives can decide if they want a new idea so badly that they're willing to delay something or to display something else in the priority. Because that's something that we used to have scope creep. Death by scope creep was just commonplace. And a well-managed backlog really helps make that visible. And then the business can make a decision.
Cool. Makes sense. Great, guys. Actually, we are running a little ahead of time, which is good. And from a question perspective, we are almost done. And I would now like to take questions from our audience. And I would apologize if I cannot take some of them because there is big list of this. So let me start, and I would request that probably you all don't have to answer until this is really very subjective, and one of you can answer in respect of everybody's time. So I'm starting with the questions now. I don't have name of that guy here, but we speak about value, mindset, culture, very powerful words, but either misunderstood or not at all understood. Can you please give an example for delivering value?
So I have a great example of delivering value. So I'm working with a client right now who has decided that that the organization needs to use Microsoft Teams for its collaboration. And they declared their work complete. And this is an Agile IT organization. They declared their work complete when all of the team members had Microsoft Teams installed on their computers. Now here's the problem. No one is trained on it. No one anticipated COVID-19. No one anticipated everyone working from home. So while they all have the application, no one knows how to use it. No one can get it to work outside of their firewall, on and on and on and on and on. The value delivered was basically zero, even though the IT organization did what they believe traditionally they are chartered to do, which is select a tool, buy the tool, and get the tool put onto people's personal computers. So to me, value is in the eyes of the user, the customer, and it is the ability to accomplish what I am looking to accomplish by whatever it is that I'm getting, whether it's a product or a service. And it's not just the box of software, it's the whole enchilada.
Let me just pull on that very quickly.
What do you think,
Sure. Yeah. I think it's beautiful. I think you mentioned it very beautifully. I'm just going to give a little bit more tools to this. So value by itself is very, very difficult to quantify. Value by itself is very difficult to quantify. You want to quantify in multiple forms, right? Sometimes it means happiness to the customer. Sometimes it means return of investment. Sometimes it might mean benefit to the society. So by itself is difficult to quantify, but there is a beautiful metric guide that we have created in scrum.org called evidence-based management. What it says is metrics can be measured in 4 different categories: unrealized value, realized value, ability to innovate, and time to market. You take these 4 categories and you use combination of metrics. And this combination of metrics is going to give you that value. Okay.
Somebody is
So yeah,
not on mute, please do so.
yeah. So look at that guide, evidence-based management. It might help you further for the person who is asking this question.
Mhm.
You can also use just very simple business measurements. I talk about Saab Manufacturing, who iterated their fighter jet. They had very simple metrics. They had 2 things they were going for. Have we reduced time to market and operational costs by 75%? Boom, and they got it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Keep it simple.
Yeah, and that's how that was their test of whether they're being successful. They getting the value they needed out of going and practicing Scrum.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm taking the next question now. I like the idea of start giving control to teams, but quite often I noticed teams are not able to handle this freedom properly because they are new to this and begin to lose trust from management. How can we make this transition successful? Probably one mantra each from each of you.
Yeah, so empowerment has to be earned, right? Empowerment cannot be commanded. It has to be earned, and that you have to do with practice, right? So for example, a junior team member comes and says, maybe I'm just talking about development team, they want to take control or they want to get control, yeah, but they have to earn it. Until you earn it, there'll be someone who is going to give you that piecemeal, and they are going to guide you further. But once that trust is established, when that empowerment is earned, because empowerment also comes with accountability, isn't it? You can't say, you know what, I'm empowered, so I'm going to make a decision, but if something goes wrong, it is my manager who created this problem. It can't be that way. So to get control, you have to earn it. You have to gain the trust of the ecosystem, from the organization, from the leaders, and then it happens. Then the magic happens. It takes a while. That's the beauty of Scrum, isn't it? It's not simple.
True.
I can go back to the Scrum values. Like trust is one of the core Scrum values, right? We need to have that kind of trust. But along with that comes openness. If a team, if you feel a team isn't taking advantage of their freedom the way they need to, are they practicing openness in a way? Is their work really visible? Are they actually raising impediments, right? And this is the thing, when you're working with a particularly new team, they're scared to raise impediments because it might make them look bad. That's the thing that you actually have to work to build the muscle of openness to establish that kind of trust. And that involves not just the team, but the management as well, right? The team members have to trust that then when they make an impediment visible, that the leadership is actually going to remove the impediment, right?
Yeah.
So it requires the commitment of the entire system.
Yeah, makes sense. Any mantra from you, Laura?
To build a little bit on what Hiren was saying, was to me the thing about Scrum is the team is responsible for pulling work in during sprint planning and making a commitment to delivering that work. And the daily stand-up is meant to be inspecting and adapting for the sake of the sprint and making sure that we're staying on course. So there's all of these inspect and adapt loops that are built into Scrum that basically are points of, hey, we made a commitment, how are we doing? Do we need to adjust course? And then using the values that Jeff referenced, if we're off of course, we need to be open about it. We need to communicate it. We need to walk our talk, if you will. The thing that I like about Scrum is the team is making a commitment for a typically 2-week period of time in the US these days. Most sprints tend to be 2 weeks long. And with a good Scrum Master who understands how to coach the team and help them work through the impediments and through the communication challenges, you build that muscle to the point where management gets to respect the team and be willing to give them more and more leeway in terms of how they're working.
Sure. Great. Totally, I mean, very valid points you guys brought up, and there could be many more, but I think these three important points are very, very valuable. I'm now jumping to next question, that is about how easy or difficult is to transform from Scrum to Scrum Ban. What factors we would consider while this transformation? That's by Akshay Kulkarni. Shall I repeat?
No.
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm not a
I think
Scrum Ban.
I both when we heard the term Scrum Ban. It was great Scrum teams are practicing the fundamentals of Kanban, right? They are limiting their work in progress. They're making everything visible. They're exposing bottlenecks in the form of impediments. So great Scrum teams are using the fundamentals of Kanban. I really hesitate when I hear somebody talk about, well, we have to convert to Scrum Ban. Use the ideas of both the frameworks together. You don't have to adopt it and objectify it as a different framework, right? If you want to start working with Kanban, pick up a copy of the book Personal Kanban and learn the fundamentals. Move on from that and bring those to your teams. Don't make it into another framework. You can start practicing the fundamentals of Kanban today very easily, right? Look at your task board. How many product backlog items are in progress at the same time? Would it help if we swarmed on things, right? Did we end up at the last sprint with a sprint full of almost done work, right? These are the things that basic Kanban practices can help on a Scrum team. Right, but don't make it into a project to do it.
Valid. So switching to next question. Sprint length. How does sprint length impact success of Scrum? Does it make an impact? If yes, what are the factors which should be considered when we decide the length of a sprint? That's by Jyoti Prakash.
There are multiple factors I think you need basically to determine the sprint length. So for example, let's take an example. Let's say you're doing a 1-month sprint. You started with something that this is the goal that you want to achieve, but as you're moving along, there's a lot of influx of requirements. There's like a lot of ad hoc requests that is coming in, right? Because of which your sprint goal is changing. Maybe there's a lot of chaos that is happening. If it is happening regularly, sprint over sprint, if it is one-off case, yeah, maybe you need to learn over there. But if it is happening over and over again, you might want to think of reducing your sprint length because maybe you're just not ready to do 4-week sprint right now or 1-month sprint. Yeah, this is one of the factors. The other factor you might want to consider is, if the stakeholders come and say, you know what, we can only make ourselves available every 3 weeks. If you do a 1-week sprint, maybe you're not going to get that feedback regularly that you're looking for. So there are certain factors that you need to do. So these are 2 factors I'll definitely keep in mind. But again, sprint length remains the same. Yeah? You can't say, no, we are going to do a 2-week sprint this time. The next sprint, they're going to do 3 weeks. Then they are going to do 1-week sprint. I don't think that is right. Keep it consistent. It's like a heartbeat. It's like a rhythm. And you want to keep the rhythm going very, very well. There has to be a very, very strong reason if you're going to change your sprint length from one duration to the next duration. Laura, Jeff, anything to add?
So I've been doing this 13 years. The only companies that I've seen had to move to a 3-week sprint is when the business and the product side of the company could not keep up in the teams. And it's all of a sudden very upsetting to the business side because they were used to complaining that the teams could never deliver. Now all of a sudden the teams are going faster than the business can keep up. And then often as a coach or a consultant, you have to look at, well, what's all the bureaucracy that's happening on the product side that we can't come up with ideas fast enough, right? And this is where you have to apply Scrum throughout the whole company, not just on the software development side, but on the product development and marketing side throughout the whole company, so the whole company can adapt to the rhythm of the customer. That's true. A lot of customers, you know, I worked in a client that was in satellite, did set-top boxes for satellite broadcast, and they can't just push software out really quickly. The act of pushing new software out and finding out often takes weeks to get it out to all their customers, and so they have to adapt in a certain way. But great companies, and when they work with customers, they figure it out together.
Sure.
The two ideas that I would add is the longer the sprint, the easier it is for the team to fall into mini waterfall. So I tend to steer away from month-long sprints unless there's a strong product reason, like some of what you're referencing, Jeff, that might force someone to look at that. And I still see in the US, it's pretty hard to do 1 week sprints just because of the amount of overhead that's necessary to support all of the events on a weekly basis. And the stories, or, you know, the backlog increment items, whatever you want to call them, they're still too big. And you've got to become really good at small items if you're going to run in a week. So, you know, you kind of get squished in one direction or the other.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah, great. I'm now coming to next question. We know that Scrum has stakeholders, product, in which we count product owner, Scrum team, and Scrum master. So one question is here, like, if we fail, then what is your experience? Is that failure always at the end of product owner, or it is entire team or entire organization?
Yeah,
There's
let's
nothing
remove
wrong
that
with
concept of
failure.
failure. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with failure. You know, I quote Jeff Bezos once wrote a letter to all of the shareholders of Amazon, the shareholders telling them he wanted Amazon to be the best company in the world to fail at, right? Don't look to punish failure, reward failure, right? Don't reward continuous failure. You want to reward learning. If you tried something in an experiment, we're back to risk management. We tried this out. It was a risky deal. We failed at it. Let's iterate and try something different, right? We didn't make a big, long plan that lasted months and then figure it out. It failed at the end. We failed quickly.
Yeah. Like Ken says, right? Ken says Scrum Sprint will never fail you. It is just it's a framework that gives you opportunistic discovery, right? You run it, it's an experiment. Experiment can have two results, right? Either you learn, either you had a success or you learned something, and you take the learning and you feed into the next sprint. But there is no one person to be blamed over here, right? You're not putting someone's neck on the line. Yeah, there's accountability, but apart from that, Scrum is a framework for opportunistic discovery. You run an experiment, that experiment teaches you. Example, COVID-19, exactly. There are so many vaccines being practiced right now, right? All these vaccines are not going to fly. And there is billions and billions of dollars that are being spent right now. Eventually, they are going to pick 2 or 3 vaccines that entire 7 billion population is going to get. Yeah. But that experiment is teaching us something, right? What does not work. And that is so important, because this is like, because this has taken our entire economy by storm at this point.
Yeah. And thank goodness they're doing a lot of stuff in parallel, right? And moving quickly and iterating, because if they had done one and said, okay, now that one didn't work, let's go back and start over. That would be a very sad place to live.
Yeah.
Product owners make wrong product decisions. They make wrong priority decisions. Teams make the wrong technical decisions. Management makes bad decisions about how they deal with impediments. It happens. It's all related together. And
well, and it's not even just that. It's the market shifts.
Yeah.
You know, stuff happens outside that makes what you did last week irrelevant.
Customers make mistakes about what they thought was most important.
Yep. They're always right,
Sure.
except for when they're not.
Yeah.
Great. A lot of interesting questions are coming. I'm sure we may not answer all, but offline we can probably interact with those guys later. But we still have 5 minutes as per our schedule. So I'm coming to next question. When it comes to Scrum Master, that question is by Harpriya. When it comes to Scrum Master, they are being treated as project manager, and I don't know why. Scrum Master is looked like this. Why the perception on Scrum Master is changing from organization to organization? I think, yeah, that question is by Harpriya.
I think the Scrum Master perspective is same everywhere. So like Scrum Master is Scrum Master, right? Master of the Scrum process, a true servant leader. So this is a universal explanation. How people interpret it is different in different organizations. So in Harpriya's organization, maybe there is something that that needs some type of adjustment, or someone needs to come in and educate it. Harpriya, just a question to you. I don't know if you can answer it. I can unmute it. Have people gone through some type of formal training? Have they been educated, or it is by the books? Mostly what happens is when you go by the books and you don't have anyone to any helping hand, sometimes you can go on the wrong track. But project manager keeps control. Again, I'm not making a blanket statement. The way I see it is project manager keeps control, Scrum Master gives control. So if a project manager can quickly switch that role in the head and say, you know what, I am willing to give control, you will be the most awesome Scrum Master, because you have earned that title over years, and you'll be one of the best Scrum Masters to lead or help the team or guide the team.
You know, in my experience, often when you see that, you're looking at an organization that hasn't reached the level of maturity that it's ready to iterate the organization and give up on the need for top-down project management, right? Which is a transition that often has to happen. The transition from project manager to Scrum Master is probably one of the more difficult transitions to make. I know this is a tradition I went through, and I had to learn. I had a lot of tough love. I was very lucky that I had a really great Scrum team that gave me a lot of tough love when I started acting like a project manager. The best, most successful large Agile transformation I ever went through. This was a 3,000 person organization, and the vice president in charge of the whole organization was really good at when he saw somebody behaving a certain way, he would say, "You're being a project manager right now," right? You know, he would hear back that behavior. You know, stop being a project manager. I want you to be a Scrum Master now. It's a hard transition to make, but the organization has to make the commitment to go on that transition with you. If you're applying for a job, those are questions you want to ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are there project managers in this organization? What do they do? Do they have control over the project? Oh, you want me to do the project management stuff? Tell me what that looks like. Yeah.
True. So yeah, it's a related question. Probably I can also answer one. Can we have reporting manager as Scrum Master? Answer is yes, I guess. That's very simple, right? So as far as
It depends.
Yeah, it depends on the context.
Yeah, that's actually not a recommended practice. If I go by the book, is to have the Scrum Master be your reporting manager, because you don't know who, you know. Then I don't know if I'm a team member. I'm like, who are you being right now? Are you being my Scrum Master, who's going to help me, or are you being my boss, who's telling me what to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as you're helping, we are fine. You know, if you're hurting, we are not fine. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I once reported to the CTO of a company who was a product owner on a project I was working, internal project I was working on. He actually went and got 2 hats, right? And when he was wearing the product owner hat, I could negotiate with him. But when he was wearing the CTO hat, he was my boss, and I had to do what he said.
Sure.
So That's all. If you're going to be a reporting manager as a Scrum Master, people have to know who you're being in the moment to be able to trust you. Yeah.
Sure. I think the last question of this session. While working as Scrum Master or Agile Coach with teams, often I feel some of the processes or artifacts are overkilling. For example, DOR. Some teams can do away with that and still continue deliver perfectly sprint after sprint. So is it a good idea to have this flexibility to skip having some of the artifacts, skip some of the artifacts? One thing is to note here is that these teams are working on complex projects, so they do get benefited by following the overall Scrum framework by Sriram. So long question, but I think the point here is about the processes and the documentation, which sometimes get overkilling. So related to that, I mean, if you can answer.
So let me take this, right?
Sure.
I'll just explain Scrum in a very simple way, right? Scrum has 3 roles, 5 events, 3 artifacts. Yeah, the 3 roles are product owner, Scrum Master, development team, and they talk about accountability. We have 3 artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and product increment. It's all about transparency. And to enable inspection adaptation, we have 5 events: sprint, sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective. Apart from that, everything is complementary. As long as you follow 3-5-3, you're doing scrum. Yeah, but if you miss any of this, we are going to question your scrum at that point. But apart from this, ready is complementary. Refinement is complementary practice. But if you do it, it is going to help you immensely. Yeah. So you keep it that way, it will be very simple for you.
Sure.
But if it's getting in your way of working with a customer, often I find in a lot of new companies that are new, they immediately get a definition of ready going out of the gate, and then it becomes a talk to the hand, right? Oh, I'm not going to talk to you about this product backlog item because it doesn't meet the definition of ready. That's when it's not too useful, and maybe it's useful to just set it aside for a little bit.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Before that, I would really like to thank everyone, especially the panelists who have been so patient and so elaborative in their answers and explanations. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone.